Hey everyone, in today's episode of the Security Swarm podcast, I've got Jan Bakker on, and we're going to be talking about Passkeys. Now, Passkeys is kind of a buzzword in the industry right now, but there's a real valuable technology that underpins that word, right? So Passkeys can ultimately be a replacement for passwords, and the MFA process will ultimately make lives easier for end users and will help us as security professionals as well. So in this episode, we're answering the question of what are passkeys, why are they valuable, and where do they fit into the 365 ecosystem ultimately. So that and lots more coming up on today's episode of the Security Swarm podcast. Well, everyone, welcome to the Security Swarm podcast, the podcast that brings you the knowledge and insight straight from the security lab here at Hornet Security. As always, I'm your host, Andy Serwich, and I'm joined by a new face today. I've got Jan Bakker on. How's it going, Jan?
Thanks for having me. It's going great. How are you?
Doing good. I'm really excited to have you on for this episode. I've been wanting to talk about passkeys for a while. It's a topic we haven't touched on this show yet. And, you know, all of the great content that you've put out in the community, I've actually found it useful myself for some of the stuff I do. So it's just great having you on the show, Jan. Really looking forward to today's conversation.
My pleasure.
Definitely. And for those that may not know who you are, can you give us a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you said, my name is Jan Bakker. I'm based in the Netherlands. So I live near to Amsterdam, and I'm focused on Entra, so the whole stack. And when you say Entra, which is the new name for what we used to call as Azure Active Directory, we talk about conditional access, MFA, but I'm also a little bit into device management, so more security-related stuff. And I'm a fighter of passwords, of course, because I hate them. So that's me.
You and me both. Those on the show, they know I spent a good chunk of my career in the MSP space, and it shouldn't surprise me, but it's still, even right up to my last day in the trenches for an MSP, I was still shocked at the times that you would walk up to somebody's workstation and there's a sticky note with the password right on it. Or the really sneaky ones, you would move their keyboard and there would be a sticky note under the keyboard, right? And don't even get me started on weak
like
passwords.
Nobody's going to look there under the keyboards. Yeah,
I know, right?
It's a pain.
Anyway, I'm getting ahead of us. So today we are talking about passkeys, of course, you know, what they are, what the use case is, what problems they solve. But I figure it would be interesting to kind of start with one of the major problems in the space. And I think you're a great person to talk about this, Jan, just because of all of the great Evilgenics content that you've got out there. And we're going to talk about adversary in the middle attacks, right? Mm-hmm. And some people have in the past have called them man in the middle attacks, right? I think the new current official saying is adversary in the middle. And when I look at these style of attacks, from where I sit, historically, it was always about the threat actor snooping on traffic mid-transit, right? Trying to pull information out of it. But lately, and I say lately, and really it's like the last couple of years now, we've seen an uptick in MFA bypass kits. So I just mentioned Evilgenics, right? There's a whole other host of them out there. There's the Phishing kit. There's Evil Proxy, right? There's a whole host of them. But the whole, kind of attack chain behind that, and I'll link to some of your resources. And there was a webinar I did where I actually demoed Evilgenics as well. I'll put those in the show notes for you folks to check out. But the whole attack chain behind those MFA bypass kits is tricking the end user into logging into a seemingly M365 login page, right? And then not only is the username and password captured, the bypass kit actually has the end user go through the MFA process, and then it captures the session token on the way back, right? And then forwards the user to the legitimate login page. And as far as the user is concerned, like, oh, hey, something weird happened with my login. I guess I should log in again, right? And they're none the wiser. So to me, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, Jan, adversary in the middle attacks have kind of gone up a notch in danger level just because of that, right? What are your
Correct.
thoughts before we get into kind of the traditional protection methods?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with Adversary in the middle, it's still the case that they snoop into your session, and snoop along is what's going over the line, right? Because those attacks use proxy techniques. So they trick you into clicking on a link, which is of course not the domain that you want to sign in. And then all the traffic is being captured through the proxy and pushed to the service that you actually want to go. But you can either snoop the traffic, but also manipulate the traffic. And that's what's being done, basically, because they can just rewrite all the headers, all the body information. And you mentioned Evil Jinx. I know that platform for a while now. It's almost too easy because it's you can set it up in under 10 minutes and go phishing. And I've done several blog posts on it, so videos, just to point out how easy it is to set it up in your own infrastructure. So you buy a domain, you buy a VPS, you do clickety-clack, and you have yourself a phishing machine.
Yeah.
And
it's not hard.
It's not hard because I can do it, and I'm not that technical when it comes to Linux machines and terminals and proxy techniques. But so it's just too easy. And not only it can snoop the user's passwords, but as you said, it captures the tokens. So it basically steals your cookies, and that's the trickiest part because the user just goes through the whole process of signing in. They enter the username, the password, that's being captured right away. And after that, they're being prompted for MFA because most of the environments are now protected with MFA. So the user gets that notification, right? They, as usual, and in the backend, the proxy just snoops the cookies, and you can just simply import that cookies into your own browser. And being authenticated as that user, and you have the MFA claim everything inside of the cookie. So for as long as that cookie is valid, you have unlimited access to their environment. And most of the times they do not even know that they're being phished. Like you said, they say, oh, it timed out, I'll try again, and now I'm in.
Yeah. So I was actually, I think it was last week, I was kind of explaining the style of attack to a group of our internal sales and pre-sales folks, just to kind of keep them up to date on, current attacks and things like that. And, the question came up like, well, isn't it hard to get a convincing looking domain to use for this type of attack? And I use the example of Nike.com. I'm like, okay, let's say I'm a threat actor and I want to go target Nike for some reason. So I went out to GoDaddy and I'm like, okay, let's see if we can find something that would be somewhat convincing. And Nike-365.com is available. And so if I'm a rank and file worker at Nike and I'm trained to look at the URL and I see Nike-365.com, am I going to question it? I don't know. Probably not. So
it's too easy. And I think the domain name, most of the folks, they want to be as convincing as they can be. So they buy the domain almost 1 year up front to avoid scanners like when you request a certificate, all the scanners come along. But then again, if you're in a hurry and you're just a regular user, chances are big that you just don't care about the URL. Because I've seen native Microsoft services with the most weird URLs, and they just click it, like when you use Booking or other services within Microsoft. For example, Power Automate used to be Flow. So when you try something with that domain name, it will also work as well. So I think the email itself needs to be convincing, but the domain name, I don't care that much. But I've been warned by my providers several times that I bought domain names that pretty much looked like MicrosoftOnline.com, but then it had double I's in it or double L's, for example.
Right.
But those are out there for sale, and everyone can buy them.
Or the other method I've seen, it's not as frequent, but is tricky, they'll use a QR code, right? Oh, hey, scan this QR code and log into your 365 account to enable this app or whatever the narrative is, right? And so now not only have they moved that attack from a corporate protected device to the user's personal device, it's just the user probably is not going to see the full URL once they move it to the mobile device, right? So
Exactly.
lots of ways around that.
That's scary because they take it away from the protected environment.
Yep.
But I've seen so many ways to let that URL end up by an end user. The last example that pretty much blew my mind was they used webhooks in Microsoft Teams to manipulate and just send it through a webhook. So
interesting.
you can use text-based or chat-based. You have so many channels these days to go to the end user and say, hey, let's click this or do that,
and they know that email is still used a lot, but they know a lot of business communication happens in Teams these days, right? So go where the users are at, right?
Exactly.
So it's always interesting to see those method changes from threat actors. So when I'm talking about adversary in the middle of text, the next thing question that always pops up is like, okay, well, what are we supposed to do about this? And historically, when again we look at those traditional adversary in the middle style attacks, where again threat actors were just trying to snoop on traffic as it's passing, right? The advice was always to do things like make sure you're using encrypted protocols, HTTPS, etc. Right? Make sure you're using MFA, which is great advice. Make sure, and I think when I look at the MFA bypass kits that we've been talking about, I think the big advice that I've seen is like, well, we have to educate end users on how to spot, suspect emails. It's not perfect, but it helps, right? And so that comes to the key part of today's conversation is like, how do we protect against MFA bypass kits like this? And Passkeys ultimately enters into the conversation, right? And so I know that you've done a lot with Passkeys recently, Jan. Why don't you give us a quick rundown for maybe our users that have not done much with Passkeys yet?
Yeah, sure. So Passkeys is this new buzzword that's going all over the internet, which will eventually fix all our security problems. Well, we get back to that later.
We will. Yep.
It will solve a part of our problem, which are, of course, the passwords that we use, and eventually also the MFA kits that are out there that can snoop our cookies and just steal our tokens, so to say. But let me give you a quick introduction of what are passkeys when we talk about passkeys. So passkeys is a new standard that is based on FIDO standards, and FIDO is the alliance that is it stands for Fast Identity Online. I'm not sure what that is, but eventually they come up with standards that are making safer authentication methods. So like Passkeys. Passkeys is the product.
And I think they did the OAuth standard too, if I remember correctly, right?
Exactly. So FIDO is eventually two protocols, one being WebAuthn, which is pretty much the browser API that developers can use. The other one is the CTAP2 protocol, which is the client to authenticator protocol. So that will solve everything around biometrics, unlocking TPM chips, for example. So that will do the local part of FIDO, where WebAuthn will do the browser and server-side part. So basically, that's it. FIDO is our two protocols, and a product of that. So based on those FIDO standards, we have Passkeys, which will ultimately replace our passwords for a, of course, faster identification, but also easier to use and most important, phishing resistant.
Right.
So that's what a passkey basically is.
And I think the work I've done with Passkeys, the big thing that always comes back to me on this is, why are they so much better than passwords? And I think the big thing is It's based on public key cryptography.
Exactly.
And I think the really powerful piece of passkeys is the fact that there are no secrets stored on the server side of the process. So, when I don't know, I'll use Facebook.com as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Today, using a password, when I log into Facebook.com, as part of the process, Facebook is holding, a hashed version of my password. Do they match, right? So an attacker could, if they breach Facebook, and again, this is theoretical, by the
Mm-hmm.
way, if any Facebook lawyers are listening, just an example. Anyway, but if they're breached and that hash is taken, potentially the threat actor could, break the password. In passkeys,
Mm-hmm.
there is nothing stored on the server side.
There
And
is.
so essentially on the client device, we use a smartphone as an example, but you could use like a FIDO key or
Mm-hmm.
a password manager. I think Bitwarden has this functionality baked in. There you've got a public key and a private key. The private key never leaves the device ever. And essentially, when I log into a website with a passkey, the website basically says, "Hey, here's a challenge. I want you to sign this challenge, and if they match, okay, everything works. You're allowed to log in. You are who you say you are." And that's the beautiful part of this, is that the private key is never known and cannot be taken in the event of a breach of whatever service you're logging into, right? So I think that's what the really powerful piece of this is.
Exactly.
But did I miss anything there, Jan? I think I covered it all.
Yeah, pretty much it. So the when you create a passkey, you're basically creating a cryptographic pair, and you will keep one, the private part, and you will send the public part to the online services. Yep. They will store the public part. So agree, when that gets stolen, who cares? And
yeah, exactly.
You are the one who can unlock the local part using either biometrics, a PIN, or something else that can prove your existence, and then you will just exchange and satisfy the request, and that is basically it. It will eventually replace your password, not only your password, but also your multi-factor authentication, because it counts as strong authentication, and that's the beauty. So there are several. I've got it right open here. There are several services that already support passkeys, and it's cool to check them out. It's on passkeys.directory. That's the domain name, and it will list all the online services which are today supporting passkeys. And I see some big names here: Adobe, Apple. I think, let's see, Coinbase, for example.
For listeners, I'll put that in the show notes as well too, cool. So you have quick access to that.
Exactly. So passkeys are already there, and you mentioned password managers. I personally use 1Password, and that already supports passkeys. So when you sign into those services using traditional credentials, I would say, so password, MFA, TOTP tokens, it will prompt you to say, hey, this service now supports passkeys. Do you want me to create one? And it's just a matter of one single click, and you got yourself a passkey. So that's brilliant, right? And you never have to worry about your password again, or multi-factor authentication, all that sort of stuff. So it blew my mind. But funny fact, I share my my Google account with my household, and they signed in with the credentials, and they created a passkey for me. So I get an email saying, "Hey, we made a new passkey for you," and I was like, "Oh no, I have to I'm hacked. I need to reset all my passwords."
That's what I would have thought too.
So later on, it turned to be my wife. So she said, "Hey, I created some passkey. I'm not sure what it is, but it's supposed to be more secure." I say, "Okay, it is more secure, but next time, give me a little heads up when you break into my account and create passkeys, right?" So that really scared me for a while. But yeah, that's the great thing. It's so integrated with everything out there. Password managers, and even the Apple ecosystem. Every ecosystem just simply works. So
right,
that's great.
Definitely. And that's how I consume passkeys is via the Apple ecosystem. And it, like you said, it just works. And I think that's the other really nice thing about Passkeys is the user convenience part of it. And because, you know, I go back to situations where I was part of a team or running a project where we were enabling MFA for an organization. You always have those users that are, they're grumpy about it, right? Oh, there's just one other app I have to install, and now I have to put this code in when I log in, and you're making it harder for me to do my work. With Passkeys, they're just going to see this passkey thing and their login, and they're going to go through a simple process, and they don't have to remember a password. They don't have to put in a token, a code or anything. It just works.
Exactly.
And I think from the end user experience perspective, it's going to be nice because not only is it useful for them, but on the security side, we're not having to deal with things like, simple dumb passwords like password 123 or serialized passwords like spring 2024, summer 2024,
Yeah,
that type of
we all
thing.
know
So,
them. Yeah. Exactly, and
so
it's going to be really familiar for the end user as well, because I'm not sure how that is in America, but in Europe, pretty much every bank, every commercial bank, do offer those kind of authentication methods on their app already, like where you unlock your
yep,
app with biometrics.
yep, yep,
Perhaps you onboarded yourself once with a passkey or password, but after that, pretty much everything is be done with biometrics or scanning
right,
a QR code, for example, and then being prompted for Face ID. All this kind of stuff is really common here. So they already familiar with the concept of passkeys. It's just that they never heard the word passkeys
right,
combined with that. So we need to tell them, oh, don't worry, it's just like signing into your bank. It's
right,
nothing fancy. It's just easy as that. So that's
yep,
also very convenient for the end user. And
yeah,
one point about the MFA, you're absolutely right. I've uh, I've done quite some MFA implementations, and even today I'm working on that for many customers. And the burden that the end users say they're gonna have probably is almost related to how you implement it, because
right,
my rule of thumb is there, if you should never over prompt a user with MFA. And that's why I'm just so big fan of, for example, Windows Hello for Business, because the strength is already in your device. You already sign in with strong credentials, right? Where your device itself is a factor from MFA. Your biometrics or your PIN is already a factor.
yep,
And when you do it correctly, a user will never even see an authentication prompt ever again. So if you use single sign-on, Windows Hello for Business, or you just stick to the rule, I only ask for an MFA prompt one time per user, per device, per password reset, for example. So if nothing really is going on with the account, why prompt the user for extra authentication? You just will train them to be phished in the end, because if you need to provide your credentials like 10 times a day without thinking,
right,
you will do it 11 times, and the last time it will be some phishing link that you need to fix in a hurry, for example. So that even we are not there quite yet, because passkeys are a little bit on the horizon, at least for the enterprises, right? I
yep,
mean, for commercial, it's already there. We're still eagerly waiting for Microsoft to launch them, but it is until we are there, we can just we could make a nice environment for our end users, which is also being secure, but we have to stop over prompting our users with MFA all the time. And that's why there is
right.
so much resistance from other organizations saying, no, I don't want MFA because it's so hard to do.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because I feel like that's something that's not talked about enough in the security space is this whole over prompting issue. The other place I see this, and maybe you've run into this before, and we've actually talked about this on the show before, and that is malicious OAuth applications.
Mhm.
You kind of have a similar issue there in that we've kind of trained end users that when they see an OAuth prompt, in order to do their job, they need to hit approve, right?
Exactly.
And so that's made it so easy for threat actors to get malicious OAuth apps in front of an end user. The end user hits approve, and now even if the end user changes their password, the app, the malicious app, is its own security principle, right? So
Exactly.
that access persists
Uh-huh.
even after the user interaction. Like I said, we did an episode on that. I'll be sure to
Mhm.
link that in the show notes, folks, in case you're interested. But I'm just, when you mentioned that behavior, I like I said, I see the same thing with OAuth apps too. So we need to talk about not over prompting more in the security industry, I think. So
We do,
anyway,
and I tell that every customer, because it's most of the times when we start implementation of MFA, that's the first question I get. How many times should we prompt our users?
yep,
What? That's stupid. We should not talk about that. And
yep,
but yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing that say how many times should we enforce our users to reset their passwords, because then they become more secure in the end. It's the same old
right.
story. It's old principles, but they don't work anymore. So luckily we have passkeys on the horizon now, which will eventually fix the password problem for all our end
Right.
users.
Right. And so you mentioned Microsoft. So there's been some indications, nothing has been made public yet, but there's some indications that we do have passkeys coming to Entra. I don't think there's anything available to share yet, but we at least know it's coming, right?
It is coming, and there is a announcement in the message center, so you can check that out for yourself. But the date is being pushed back. So first, I believe it was mid-March, and now they're aiming for next month or so. So probably should be there any minute now. But I need to mention that there within Microsoft Entra there are already phishing resistant authentication methods out there. So as of today, users can use FIDO2 security keys, which
Yep.
are also very convenient for the end user, because that will also replace their username password and just unlock with a biometric or a PIN and the FIDO2 itself. Of course, we talked about Windows Local Business, which in my opinion, if you have a one-to-one relationship with your personal device, so if you have a Windows 10 or 11 device which belongs to you, you should always enroll Windows Local Business, because that
Yep.
will also satisfy any MFA requirement that you have out there. Plus, it is being phishing resistant. So that as well is being phishing resistant. And we got this new kid on the block, which is certificate-based authentication, which is out there. So if you want to rely on certificate-based, which is also phishing resistant, you can also use that natively within Entra. And now the biggest thing that we're eagerly waiting for is passkeys. And the first thing that we can read from the message center is the support for device-bound passkeys. And as we have seen, I believe it was announced on Ignite or some big event that it will be launched within the Microsoft Authenticator app. So your phone, your Authenticator app will then be your FIDO key, so to say. So that will
Right.
make it phishing resistant. And you can unlock with biometrics or with a PIN your phone, and that will just do the authentication for you. So yeah, so I can't wait. Everybody is asking for it because, like you said in the intro, phishing is a big problem within the
Yep.
industry. It's happening every day. So we're used to password spraying attacks and all those kinds of stuff. Then we move to MFA, but I think it's it, it's going so fast. So some of them are in the middle of the MFA enrollment implementation and they're already saying, okay, we've now MFA, but yeah, that's not phishing resistant. I can still use reverse proxy techniques
Yeah.
to phish your token. You should go to Passkeys. So that's going really fast there in the technical world. But yeah, it's a cat and mouse game, like we say. So
For sure.
we should keep it up.
And that's a good point. And I have to preface my next statement with, I think MFA is great. It's fantastic. You should do it. But I have often felt like MFA is just a Band-Aid on top of a larger problem. And
It
that is
is.
our traditional passwords, right? It was it's designed to fix our traditional the issues with our traditional passwords, whereas I feel like passkeys and these other methods are, kind of the next iteration of authentication, which is fantastic. Now, that all said, we talk about phishing resistant. These methods are phishing resistant, and I have seen some talk in the industry where like, whoa, hey, phishing resistant stuff, I can, start paring down my security stack. No. When you think about phishing, I want to just kind of wrap up with this. Don't think that passkeys are the magic silver bullet that will solve all of your problems. It's fantastic. It solves some of our problems, but it doesn't solve all of them. When we talk about phishing, the token or the password is not always the end goal, right? So there's still dangers like, social engineering via email, or, your traditional C-suite fraud, or the big one that I see come up as seems like more frequently I'm running into this one. It would be like your payment redirection scam, right? Whereas if I'm a threat actor, I figure out how to contact your accounting department, and I'm like, oh, hey, you somehow inject yourself into the accounts payable process and say, hey, I need you to start sending your payment for these services to this checking account instead, right? So passkeys don't solve those problems. So
No,
you still need your traditional phish or anti-phishing solutions in your security stack. So don't get lax there.
no. It will, like you said, it will solve the problem for our end users that no longer have to remember very difficult passwords,
Right.
type in TUTP codes, respond to MFA prompts. So they can, the end users itself will be relieved by passkeys. But in the end, like you said, it's what we see where attackers go after now is, of course, the token itself. So
Yep.
once you are authenticated, no matter how you did it, the token itself, as long as it's valid, can be replayed. So think
Right.
about malware sitting on your device, just waiting for that token to come in and then steals
Yep.
it and can
Yep.
replay it. So I think this will solve a little part of the problem, but don't forget that with the token itself, you can also replay. And that's where, maybe that's something for another episode. That's where, for example, token binding comes into
Yep.
play, where you say, okay, you have this token and you received it with your shiny passkey, but now this token is being protected and can only be used from this device. If you're going to take that token away and going to replay it on another device, it will not work. That's
Right.
one thing that I see that attackers might go after next. The second thing is you need to think about onboarding and recovery, because there is always a small window of opportunity where the user does not have strong credentials registered to their account.
Right.
So there is stuff like a temporary access pass that users can get to enroll them for passkeys later on. They will buy themselves a new iPhone, for example, and they say, okay, now I have to re-enroll. How do I do that? So there will be a window of opportunity for an attacker to swoop in and register a strong credential themselves, for example. So that is
Yep.
also something to be aware of, that we might solve a lot of problems, but there are way more problems to be solved after this, perhaps. But
For
yeah,
sure.
one thing at a time. And I'm already really glad that passkeys are here. I think they're going to solve a lot of problems. I
Yep.
will I will encourage my customers and everybody in the community to enroll in Passkeys as soon as they're out there, and also take a look at the passkeys.directory website for all the public services that are out there
Yep.
already supporting Passkeys, because you can strengthen your security on, for example, LinkedIn, GitHub, all those services out there today.
Yeah, it's great to see those public services, and I feel like I stumble across a new one like almost every week lately. So it's nice to see. And one thing you mentioned about, the fact that there are going to be times where the identity protection for a given user is going to be more lax, right? One area that we've seen here in the security labs is threat actors will actually scrape LinkedIn for, hey, I just got a job with so-and-so, or I just got hired as, a project manager with this company. And so then the threat actors will figure out what their email address is, because it's not that hard to guess these days, right? And they'll start sending them these HR looking emails with the idea that, okay, their identity protection probably is currently pretty lax during, like you said, the onboarding phase, right? So definitely, I think that's another thing I feel like is not talked about enough
Very
in the
good point
industry.
there.
So.
Yep.
So anyway, well, Jan, it's been great having you on the show. I get the feeling we're going to have you back on, my friend. So been great
Always a
having you.
pleasure to do so. So let's see, maybe in a month or two or so, when Passkeys in Entra are already there, we can talk about the specifics that that we cannot share today, but perhaps in a couple of months we can do. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it'd be nice to peel that apart and kind of get the specifics of how it works. Before we wrap up, really quick, if people want to get a hold of you, how can they reach you?
Yeah, sure. So I actually I got a very nice URL that's easy to remember. It's aka.ms/Jan Bakker. So there you will find all my my handles and my blog site, which is janbakker.tech, where I blog about everything related to what I do. Also check out the Evil Jinx resources to play with yourself and see how easy it is to set up, to convince your stakeholders, because that's the goal, right? We want to convince our stakeholders, saying, hey, MFA is not enough. We should really go phishing resistant. We should go to Passkeys.
It is shockingly easy. And I mean, I've been in IT for 23 years now, in security for, like focusing on security for, like 5 now. I am continuously shocked at how easy this stuff is. I shouldn't be surprised anymore, but I still am. Anyway, it's definitely for all those resources you mentioned, Jan. I'll put those in the show notes as well, folks, so you have easy access to those. Jan, again, thanks for being on the show today. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And then yes, definitely. And then those of you watching, thanks for spending some time with us. If you found value in today's episode, if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to smash that like and subscribe button, as they say. Otherwise, we're available on all the major podcasting platforms. So chances are you can find us wherever you, consume your content. You can also find us out at hornetsecurity.com. So we've got links to the show there as well. Other than that, we'll let you go. Stay safe out there, and hope to see you again next week for another episode of the Security Swarm podcast. Have a good one.